This is Mark in the Dark with another part of forgotten history. Today, the birth of the Weimar Republic. In the winter of 1919, Germany was a country that had just fallen out of history. 4 years earlier, it had been one of the most powerful states in Europe, a giant of industry, science, and culture. Now the empire was gone. The Kaiser had fled. And in the capital, Berlin, the future of the country was uncertain. The crisis had erupted only weeks earlier. On November 9th, 1918, two different versions of Germany appeared almost at the same moment. From a balcony of the Reichstag, Social Democrat Felix Schneemann announced the birth of a paramilitary republic. A few hours later, across the city, revolutionary socialist Karl Liebknecht declared a socialist republic. Two republics, two futures, one country. 2 days after the political collapse, the war ended. In a railway carriage in the forest of Campagne, a German delegation led by Matthias Eisenberger signed the armistice on November 11, 1918. But the end of the war did not feel like defeat to many Germans. German armies had been retreating, but they had not been destroyed. No Allied troops marched into Berlin. German soldiers returned home in formation. For many veterans, the sudden collapse of the empire seemed mysterious, even unreal. That emotional confusion would shape the political climate of the new republic. In early 1919, Germany's new leaders attempted to build a democratic state out of the ruins of an empire. The Social Democrats, Friedrich Ebert, became the head of the new government. Because Berlin remained unstable, Germany's National Assembly met in the quiet city of Weimar. There, representatives began drafting what would become the Weimar Constitution. It was one of the most democratic constitutions in Europe at the time. Universal suffrage, civil liberties, a parliamentary system. Germany was becoming a republic. But outside the assembly hall, the country was far from calm. In January 1919, revolutionary unrest exploded in Berlin. Communist leaders, including Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht, attempted to push Germany towards a socialist revolution. The government responded with force. It relied heavily on volunteer paramilitary units known as the Freikorps. These units were largely made up of former soldiers and officers. They were strongly nationalist, deeply anti-communist, and accustomed to violence after 4 years of war. The uprising was crushed. Luxemburg and Liebknecht were captured and killed. The new republic had survived its first major crisis, but the methods used to defend it revealed just how fragile Germany's political order had become. Germany faced another challenge in 1919. Millions of soldiers were returning home. The war had mobilized more than 13 million men. Nearly 2 million had been killed. Millions more were wounded or psychologically scarred forever. For many veterans, the war provided identity, discipline, and purpose. Civilian life offered uncertainty. The Freikorps provided something familiar: structure, comradeship, and a continuation of the wartime experience. Across Germany, these paramilitary groups fought communist uprisings, battled revolutionary movements, and in some cases even joined campaigns in the Baltic regions against Bolshevik forces. Germany was trying to build a democracy, but much of the country still lived in the habits of war. In June 1919, Germany faced another moment of decision. The Allied powers presented the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. Germany was required to accept territorial losses in Europe, the loss of overseas colony, limits on German military, and financial reparations. The treaty also included the controversial War Guilt Clause, assigning responsibility for the war to Germany and its allies. Across the political spectrum in Germany, the treaty was deeply unpopular. The government debated signing it, but the Allied powers made clear the rejection would mean renewed war. Germany's army was exhausted. The country was still under blockade. In the end, the government signed. By the end of the year, Germany was a new country. The empire had disappeared. A republic had been created. A democratic constitution had been written. But the society around it was tense, divided, and still struggling to understand the shock of defeat. The war had ended, yet its consequences were everywhere: political violence, economic hardship. A generation of veterans returning to an uncertain future. 1919 was the beginning of the Weimar Republic, but it was also the beginning of a long and difficult search for stability in a country still marked up on the upheaval of war. This has been Mark in the Dark, shedding a little more light on forgotten parts of history. Don't forget to watch last week's video on Germany in 1918 And stay tuned for next week's video exploring Germany 1920.